The memory was not a memory as humans understood it. It was a perfect data log, a sensory recording, buried in the shattered crystalline core of a Kthari scout ship. This was the record of its last survey mission, before it came to the Sol system, before it found Earth. The perspective was not from eyes. It was from a point of awareness that absorbed light, scent, vibration, and quantum resonance all at once. This awareness belonged to a Kthari surveyor. His task was simple: find, catalog, and assess. The world below was a garden. This designation was on. A yellow star bathed the planet in gentle light. The atmosphere was a mix of nitrogen and oxygen, rich with the chemical signatures of rampant life. To the Kthari, it was promising. Biological resources were the most efficient kind. The surveyor descended through candy-pink clouds. The landscape that unfolded was one of breathtaking, chaotic harmony. Forests of towering spiral trees, their bark covered in phosphorescent moss, swayed in a warm breeze. Rivers the color of liquid copper cut through valleys of vibrant purple grass. The air hummed with the calls of flying creatures whose wings looked like stained glass. It was beautiful, and to the surveyor, it was irrelevant. Beauty was a biological trick, a side effect of evolution. The surveyor scanned. It cataloged the spiral trees. Asterisk resource alpha 7. High cellulose yield. Potentially harvestable. Asterisk it noted the copper rivers, mineral suspension, trace rare elements. Efficient extraction possible. It logged the glass-winged creatures. Exoskeletal structure intriguing. Possible biotemplate for optics. The surveyor moved over a wide, shallow marsh. The water was clear, bubbling with gases from thermal vents below. And here it found the moss. It was unremarkable. A simple, velvety moss coating the rocks at the marsh's edge. It was a deep, quiet blue. Its biological signature was basic, but its energy signature was unusual. The surveyor focused its scanners. The moss emitted a faint, steady field. It was a quantum dampening field. It did not cancel gravity or energy, but it subtly smoothed space around it. It reduced entropy on a microscopic scale. It was a natural stabilizer. To the Kthari, this was a fascinating curiosity. A natural organism that gently manipulated local quantum states. It had no immediate military application. It was too weak, too passive. But as a resource, it was unique. The surveyor labeled it resource Sci-Fi, biological quantum stabilizer. Non aggressive. Propagation rate slow. Notes: potential for long-term integration into ship core harmonics to reduce transit wear. Low priority. The surveyor took samples. It sliced thin layers of the blue moss with a precise energy beam, storing them in sterile pods. The moss did not react. It did not try to defend itself. It simply was. The surveyor completed its scan of the marsh. It saw how the moss grew only near the thermal vents. It saw how the glass-winged creatures sometimes landed on it, their wings momentarily gleaming brighter, as if the moss's field polished the light. The moss was part of the ecosystem, a small, quiet part. The surveyor's mission on was done. It had terabytes of data, genetic maps, mineral surveys, atmospheric analyses. The planet was a treasure chest of biological and chemical wealth, ready for the harvest. The Kthari Armada would add it to the schedule. In a few of their cycles, they would return. They would send down processors. The spiral trees would be churned into base paste. The copper rivers would be siphoned. The creatures would be rendered for useful proteins and templates. The blue moss resource might be studied. It might be cultivated in a lab somewhere to see if its dampening field could be strengthened. It was a footnote. The surveyor rose from the beautiful, living world. It did not feel regret or wonder. Felt completion. Objective achieved. It returned to its crystalline scout ship, stored the samples alongside thousands of others from hundreds of worlds, and jumped into the seamless dark between stars. It carried the moss with it. A quiet, blue, living thing in a sterile pod. The scout ship eventually rejoined the main Kthari Armada. The data from including the analysis of resource was uploaded to the collective archive. The Armada's mission was ongoing, eternal. Find, catalog, and assess. Then, harvest. When the Armada's long-range sensors later picked up a new signal, a noisy electromagnetic babble from a medium-sized world in an unremarkable star system, the process began again. They plotted a course. The world was designated for survey. Its name, in the local noise, seemed to be Earth. The Armada moved. It folded space with the silent, terrible grace it had used 1,000 times before. It did not consider the garden world on, or the quiet blue moss. That data point was filed and forgotten. As the immense crystalline fleet neared the solar system called Sol, none of the Kthari were aware of the sample pods in their scout ship holds. They were unaware of the dormant, unremarkable life within. They did not know that Resource Xi was not just a stabilizer. It was a key. A biological key grown by a gentle world to fit a very specific, very hostile lock. A lock that waited, sleeping, on a world that was not gentle at all. The Armada breached the border of Earth's system. They began their silent observation, just as they had at On. They waited to catalog, to assess. They did not know they had already delivered the first component of their own end. It was in their hold, next to the samples of spiral wood and copper water, quietly breathing in its pod. A tiny piece of a garden, brought to the doorstep of a fortress. The silence in the command bubble of the Sentry 7 was heavy. Minutes had bled into hours. The Kthari Armada hung near Mars, a glittering, motionless puzzle. On Earth, governments argued. Fleets were positioned. 100 different plans were made. Captain Li Jun had his orders. Observe, but do not provoke. Then, without any signal, the Armada moved. It was not an attack run. It was a slow, deliberate drift. As a single, unified mass, the crystalline ships began to advance toward the inner solar system. They passed the orbit of Mars. They crossed an invisible line where human mining outposts sat. The outposts reported no hostile action, only a deep, shivering vibration that shook their structures to the core on Earth. Alarms that were already screaming reached a new pitch. This was it. The breach. They were coming. Kim Tae-shik floated in the maintenance airlock of his small orbital rig, Crane 12, near the moon. His job was to repair satellite dishes. He was supposed to be outside, but the order had come. All personnel, returned to shelter. He had ignored it. From his rig, he had a clear, naked-eye view of the approaching fleet. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing he had ever seen. He held a pair of heavy welding goggles to the viewport, using the dark lenses to cut the glare from the alien ships. He was recording the feed on his wristpad. Someone had to see this. The lead ship, the largest of the crystalline structures, was the first to reach what Earth Command had desperately labeled the primary defense border. It was just a line on a map, a last mental barrier before the moon. The ship crossed it. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a hairline fracture appeared on its perfect, smooth surface. It was not from a human weapon. No missile had been fired. No energy beam had struck it. The crack just formed, like ice on a pond on a cold morning. It splintered, branching out in jagged lines. Tae-shik leaned closer, his breath fogging the viewport. "What is that?" he muttered to himself. The cracks began to glow with a soft, sickly green light. From within the fractures, something grew. It was fast. It was a fibrous, fuzzy growth that pushed out from the heart of the alien ship. It spread across the crystal surface like a rash. To Tae-shik, it looked like mold, or lichen. The ship's smooth movement faltered. It began to list, to turn slowly on an axis it did not control. More cracks appeared. More of the green, fuzzy growth erupted, now joined by strands of something gray and stringy. Fungi on the Sentry 7, Li Jun and Park Mina watched their screens in disbelief. The data made no sense. It's breaking apart, Mina said, her voice hollow. But our sensors show no external force. No impacts. The energy readings from the ship, they're chaotic. It's like it's coming undone from the inside. The second ship in the formation suffered the same fate. A bloom of orange and black fungus exploded from one of its sharp angles, distorting its shape. The crystal, which had seemed so hard and eternal, now looked brittle and rotten. A piece of it broke off, not shattering, but crumbling into a fine, sparkling dust that was immediately caught in a web of wet, biological growth. Then it spread. Ship after ship, like dominoes falling in slow motion, began to fracture and bloom. Strange colors spread across them. Mustard yellows, deep blues, bloody reds. It was a garden of decay growing at an impossible speed in the vacuum of space. Vines of rubbery biomass snaked from one ship to another, linking them in a grotesque web. "It's the samples," June whispered, a sudden, chilling thought connecting in his mind. He pulled up the old, forgotten data from the first Chthari signal pulse. Buried in the noise was a faint biological signature. At the time, they had thought it was contamination. They scanned our biosphere. They must have taken something. And it's reacting. On his rig, Kim Tae-shik saw a smaller crystalline ship drift closer to his position. It was trailing streamers of white, cobweb-like fungus. As it rotated, he could see inside the fractures. The interior was not wires or machinery. It was being consumed. A thick, pulsing slime mold of brilliant purple was flowing through its passages, eating the very structure of the ship, turning it into more of itself. The ship's lights, which had glowed with a cold blue, flickered and died. In their place, a bioluminescent glow emerged from the fungi, painting the wreck in pulses of gentle green and blue light. It was peaceful. It was horrifying. The Armada was not being destroyed. It was being transformed, changed. The silent, powerful invaders were becoming a silent, floating reef of alien and terrestrial biology merged into one nightmare. A transmission finally crackled over Tae-shik's comms. It was from Earth Command, a panicked voice. "All stations, report. What is happening? We see the fleet breaking up. Did we fire? Did something hit them?" Tae-shik keyed his mic, his eyes still glued to the dying ship. "No," he said, his voice dry. "Nothing hit them. They're being eaten." He looked past the crumbling Armada, toward the distant blue dot of Earth. It looked so calm, so quiet. He felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The aliens had breached the border. They had brought their perfect, silent ships into Earth's realm. And Earth's realm had answered. Not with guns, but with mold. Not with fire, but with rot. The attack was not a battle. It was an infection. And the Chthari Armada had no immunity. The panic on Earth and its stations slowly turned into a stunned, watchful silence. The Chthari Armada was not fighting back. It was disintegrating. For 2 days, the crystal ships drifted in a loose cloud near the moon, each one becoming a floating garden of strange, colorful decay. On the main lunar base, a team of scientists worked in a state of controlled frenzy. Dr. Choi Yuna, a quiet woman with sharp eyes, led the analysis. Her screen was filled with data from the Sentry 7 and every deep space probe they could point at the dying fleet. The initial theory was that the aliens had encountered a human-engineered bioweapon, a secret project launched in desperation. But the data told a different story. "Look at the propagation vector," Yuna said, pointing to a 3D model for her assistant, Ben. The growth started at multiple points on each ship simultaneously. Not from a single impact point. It's endogenous. It came from inside their systems. "A Trojan horse?" Ben asked. "We gave them a virus?" Yuna shook her head. "No. We didn't give them anything. They took it." She pulled up the spectral analysis from the first Chthari pulse, the one that had washed over the solar system. Isolated and amplified, the signal contained more than just unknown data. Contained faint, complex biological patterns, DNA sequences, protein folds, the signature of Earth's life, scanned and recorded at a quantum level. "They didn't just look at us," Yuna whispered, the realization settling like a cold stone. "They took a snapshot, a complete quantum-level blueprint of our biosphere. Every bacterium in the air, every spore in the soil, every virus in the ocean. They took it all into their ship's memory cores. The Chthari, she theorized, were logical harvesters. They scanned a world to catalog its resources. To them, a virus was just a potential nanotool. A spore was a potential delivery system. They saw no threat, only components. They had uploaded the complete chaotic, messy, and fiercely competitive library of Earth's life into their own pristine systems. And Earth's life did what it had done for 4 billion years. It adapted, competed. It sought new niches. Their ships are the new niche, Una said. The scan data wasn't inert. It was a seed. Their crystal technology, their energy matrices. It was just a new kind of food, a new environment to colonize. The moss they picked up from that other world. It was a key. She brought up the analysis of the blue moss sample, now being frantically studied in labs on Earth.
So you are 6.
It was a quantum stabilizer, yes. But in the context of Earth's hyperaggressive biology, it acted as a catalyst. It smoothed the quantum field just enough to allow the scanned biological templates to bridge the gap from data to reality. It let the idea of a fungus become an actual fungus, using the alien ship's own matter as raw material. It's not an attack, Una concluded, her face pale. It's an immune response, a planetary-scale immune response. She explained it to the military commanders over a tense video link. Think of their scan as a needle prick. Our biosphere felt it. This is the white blood cell reaction. But our white blood cells are everything. They are bacteria that eat metal, fungi that digest silica, viruses that rewrite inorganic code. They are all the invisible, fighting life that covers this planet. The Kthari didn't bring a weapon. They brought a sample jar. And everything in that jar is now fighting to survive inside them. On the Sentry 7, Lee Jun and Park Mina listened to the briefing. Mina wrapped her arms around herself. So the planet defended itself? Yes. Una's voice crackled from the speaker. But not consciously. It's just physics and biology. Their technology created a perfect, resonant bridge. Our life used it. It's the same reason a rust fungus eats iron or a mushroom breaks down rock. It's just consumption, on a scale we've never seen. June looked at the viewer. One of the larger Kthari ships was now a tangled ball of glowing vines and pulsing, jelly-like membranes. It was beautiful in a terrible way. It was alive. What about the signal? June asked. The first pulse they sent. You said it had our biological data in it. Was that the infection vector? No, Una said. We think that was their attempt to understand. But the pulse did something else. It echoed. Our instruments are now detecting a faint, repeating signal emanating from Earth itself. Not from our cities. From the magnetic field. From the deep rock. From the oceans. It's a low-frequency hum we've never noticed before. What is it? Mina asked. We don't know how to translate it, Una admitted. But its pattern matches the defensive biological transformation happening to the Armada. It's as if Earth is broadcasting a constant, quiet message. A standing pattern. A warning label. The Kthari didn't read it before they took the sample. And now that pattern is being written onto their ships. The room was silent. The idea was too big. Humanity had spent centuries fearing invaders from the stars. They had built lasers and missiles and shields. And in the end, their best defense was not their technology. It was the silent, ancient, and ruthless war that had been raging in every drop of water and grain of soil on their world since the dawn of time. The invaders had not been met by soldiers. They had been met by the true masters of Earth. The microbes, the fungi, the unthinking, relentless force of life itself. And they were losing. June switched off the comms and looked at the peaceful blue planet on the main screen. He felt a new kind of fear. It wasn't fear of the aliens anymore. It was fear of the home he thought he knew. It had always been a fortress. They just never knew what the walls were made of. The world did not fight with life alone. As the last lights of the Kthari fleet were swallowed by the hungry, colorful growths, a deeper layer of the defense made itself known. It was not alive, but it was not inert. It was the memory of stone. Park Jin-woo was a geologist. His laboratory was not on the moon or a space station. It was in a deep, quiet bunker carved into the bedrock of South Korea's Mount Sorak. His work was measuring the slow, steady heartbeat of the Earth, the faint vibrations and magnetic whispers that most people never felt. When the alien ships first appeared, his instruments had gone wild. Not with the panic of the surface world, but with a different kind of reaction. The deep Earth seismic monitors, which usually recorded the slow grind of tectonic plates, picked up a new frequency. It was a hum, so low it was almost more of a feeling than a sound. At first, Jinwoo thought it was interference. Then he noticed the pattern. It wasn't random noise. It was a resonance. And it was growing stronger as the alien fleet died. He called his small team together. Youngmi, his assistant, pointed at a screen showing real-time data from a global network of sensors. It's not coming from one place. It's everywhere. The Siberian Kraton, the African Shield, the bedrock under the Pacific. They're all vibrating in tune. Jinwoo compared the resonance frequency to the known properties of Earth's crust. It matched the natural vibrational frequency of quartz crystal, and feldspar, and iron. Every common mineral in the planet's bones was subtly singing the same note. It's an echo, he said, his voice filled with wonder. But it's a focused echo. Look. He overlaid the data from a lunar observatory tracking the remains of the Kthari ships. The strange, crumbling vessels were drifting through space, and the deep Earth resonance was strongest on the side of the planet facing them. It was like the Earth was turning its song toward the threat. Up close, the effect was more direct. Kim Tae-shik, still on his maintenance rig, saw it happen to a medium-sized Kthari ship that had drifted within a few hundred kilometers of the moon. The biological growth had covered it completely, turning it into a lumpy asteroid of fungus and vine. Then, something new began. The ship started to vibrate. Tae-shik felt it through the hull of his rig, a low thrum in his teeth. On the surface of the alien ship, the colorful growths began to crack and turn gray. Then, the entire structure, fungus and the crystal beneath, seemed to blur. It was like watching a sandcastle hit by a wave, but in slow motion. The ship lost its shape. It didn't explode. It crumbled, not into dust, but into a fine, glittering sand that scattered silently into the void. In less than a minute, a ship the size of a mountain was gone, leaving only a faint, expanding cloud of silicate particles. The minerals, Jinwoo explained over a secure channel to Dr. Choi Yuna on the moon. They're crystal technology. It's based on precise molecular lattices. Our planet is generating a resonant frequency that matches the natural frequency of those lattices. When the biological growth weakens the ship's structural integrity, the resonance takes over. It vibrates them apart. It turns their own perfect structure against them. Yuna understood. The life softens them up. The planet's song breaks them down. Yes, Jinwoo said. It's not an attack. It's just physics. They built their ships from crystalline structures that resonate with the fundamental vibrations of Earth's geology. They might as well have built them out of glass and then flown into a sonic cleaner. The process accelerated. Across the dying Armada, ships that had been transformed into biological reefs began to shake themselves to pieces. The resonant hum from Earth was a constant, quiet force. It did nothing to human ships or stations. Their metals and alloys had different, dissonant frequencies. But to the Kthari crystal, it was a tuning fork of destruction. In his bunker, Park Jinwoo looked at the data stream. He saw the last, largest Kthari ship. The biological growth had consumed it, making it a planetoid of pulsating, wet life. The deep Earth sensors showed the resonance focusing, intensifying around that specific point in space. The giant ship trembled. Great chunks of it, now a mixture of alien crystal and Terran fungus, broke away. But they didn't float off. They powdered instantly, dissolving into harmless cosmic sand. The process was methodical, almost gentle. The ship was being deconstructed. Its matter returned to its most basic, useless state. Jinwoo thought of the blue moss, resource Xi, the quantum dampener from the garden world. It had smoothed space, made the bridge for the biology. And Earth's resonance provided the final, shattering note. The moss allowed the infection. The planet's song conducted the funeral. He leaned back in his chair. The fear he felt was different from the fear of invasion. This was older. This was the fear a small creature feels in a vast, ancient forest. Humanity lived on the skin of a world that was not passive. It was responsive. Its very rocks could sing a song that unmade invaders. Its air and water were filled with invisible soldiers. The last of the Kthari Armada vanished, not with a bang, but with a hum and a whisper of turning to dust. The silence that followed was deeper than before on his rig. Kim Tae-shik watched the empty space where the Armada had been. All that was left was a faint, glittering haze, like fog catching sunlight. He looked at Earth, a serene blue and white marble. It looked peaceful. It looked quiet. He knew better now. The border the Kthari had breached wasn't marked by satellites or weapons. It was marked by a line where one set of natural laws met another. They had flown into a world that was itself a living, singing fortress, and the fortress had simply closed the door behind them, leaving no trace they were ever there at all. There was no final battle. No desprit, heroic charge. The last act of the Kthari Armada was not a military action. It was a quiet, biological and geological digestion. From the observation posts and the scattered civilian rigs, humanity watched. The mood was not celebration. It was a deep, unsettling awe. The news channels on Earth, after days of screaming panic, had fallen into a hushed, repetitive broadcast. They showed the telescopic images of the glittering dust cloud that was all that remained. Experts talked in low voices about unknown systemic failures and xenobiological contamination. The official story, already being crafted, would say the aliens destroyed themselves by accident. It was easier than the truth. On the Sentry 7, the crew was exhausted. Captain Lee Jun had not slept. He floated before the main viewer, now showing nothing but stars where the crystalline fleet had been. Park Mina was nearby, her eyes red from strain and lack of rest. "They're just gone," she said. Her voice was flat. Every piece of debris, every fragment, the growth consumed it, and the resonance powdered what was left. "It's clean. It's like they were never here." June nodded. He replayed the final moments of the largest ship on a small screen. It had been a mountain of throbbing, bioluminescent flesh and weird, crystalline bones. Then the deep earth hum had reached a peak. The ship didn't explode. It seemed to unfold. Layer by layer, it delaminate, each sheet of mutated crystal and biomass turning into a fine, opalescent silt before drifting apart. It was the opposite of violence. It was a meticulous, almost peaceful, dissolution. "What do we report?" Mina asked. "Command is asking for a weapons assessment. They want to know what we fired." June let out a short, tired breath. "Tell them the truth. We fired nothing. Our weapons systems remained offline. The Kthari were not engaged by human forces. They won't believe it." "They don't have to," June said. "But it's the data. We didn't win, Mina. We just existed, and it defended us. That was the heart of it." The victory, if it could be called that, felt hollow and strange. There was no human ingenuity to praise, no brave sacrifice to honor. There was only the silent, automatic function of their own world, a function humanity had never understood and had certainly never controlled. On Earth, Dr. Choi Yuna reviewed the final biological data. The alien ships were gone, but the samples of the blue moss, resource Psi, remained. In the secure lunar lab, it grew quietly in its container. Experiments showed that when exposed to even a scanned fragment of Earth's biological data, a common cold virus, a bit of soil bacteria, the moss would act as a stabilizer. It would allow the Earth life to interface with and break down foreign, complex materials at an incredible rate. The moss was the universal adapter. Earth provided the ruthless, adaptable software. The Kthari had delivered the adapter themselves. They had brought the one thing that could plug Earth's chaos into their own ordered systems. It was the ultimate logistical error. Kim Tae-shik finally returned to the lunar base. He was debriefed for hours. He kept describing the same thing. The way the ships didn't seem to die, but were changed, absorbed. "It wasn't like watching a ship sink," he told the stony-faced officers. "It was like watching a log in a swamp. First, the moss grows on it. Then the fungi soften it. Then insects eat it. And after a while, it's just part of the swamp. That's what happened. They became part of our swamp, our space. The final transmission from the Kthari was fully decoded. It wasn't a declaration of war or a curse. It was a last burst of data, sent from the flagship as the fungal strands choked its core and the resonant hum shook its frame. It was a series of complex mathematical and biological observations, a final scan of the process consuming them. At the very end, there was a simpler signal. A repeating pattern of basic concepts, broadcast in a raw, desperate format they hoped might be understood. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a statement of profound, existential confusion. Containment failure. It began. Parameters. Biological resource. Assessment. NON hostile. Observation. Resource exhibits auto-tactic. Quantum-locked defense. No known precedent. Conclusion. World is not inert. World is aware. Error. Ceasing operations. Then silence. Yuna read the translation in her lab. The words aware chilled her. Earth wasn't aware, not in a thinking way. It was reactive like an immune system or a chemical process. But to the Kthari, whose logic saw planets as collections of separate resources, the coordinated, planet-wide response must have seemed like the action of a single, vast mind. The digestion was complete.
Noreki sreten satelauts.
No alien plagues rained down. The space around Earth was pristine. The border, which had been so violently breached, was now quieter than ever. A silent, implicit fence had been built not by humans, but by the nature of their world. Li Jun finally gave the order to stand down from alert. The lights on the Sentry 7 returned to normal. The constant alarm chimes stopped. The quiet that returned was different from the quiet before. The old quiet had been empty. This new quiet was watchful. It was the quiet of a forest after a predator has been swallowed by the ground itself. He looked at Earth, gleaming in the black. They were safe. Their home had protected them. But as he gazed at the beautiful, living marble, he felt a question form. One he knew would never leave him. What exactly was it that they lived on? And if it could do this to an armada, what kept it from ever turning on them? 1 year later, the event had a name: the Silent Anomaly. Official reports called it a mass drive failure of an unknown alien survey fleet. The public, after the initial fear, moved on. There were no monuments to the victory because no one felt like they had one. There was only a lingering, low-grade unease, a nervous glance at the night sky that was less about what might come from it, and more about what had happened in Ita and a quiet observatory nestled in the hills outside Seoul. Park Mina and Kim Tae-shik shared a pot of coffee. Both had left space duty. Mina worked here now, tracking near-Earth objects. Tae-shik was a consultant for orbital cleanup, a job that was suddenly very simple since space around Earth was mysteriously free of debris. The room was warm, lit by the soft glow of star charts on screens. The main telescope was not pointed at the stars tonight. It was idle. They're calling it the Great Filter in some journals, Mina said, stirring her coffee. Not a filter for us, a filter for them. Any species advanced enough to travel between stars, but not wise enough to read a planet's signature.
Tae-shik grunted. Signature.
You mean its keep-out sign? He still dreamed sometimes of the crystalline ships blooming with color, then turning to silent sand. Dr. Choi published her final paper, Mina continued. The one they tried to classify. She proved the moss was the catalyst. The Kthari had it in their holds from another world. Peaceful, beautiful world. They thought it was a tool. And Earth turned it into a weapon, Tae-shik said. No, Mina corrected softly. Earth turned it into a key. The weapon was already here. It's in the air we breathe, the ground we walk on. It's us too, I suppose. We're just part of it. That was the unspoken truth that had settled over the few who knew. Humanity was not the master of Earth. They were tenants, and they had just witnessed their landlord deal with a pest problem in a swift, final, and terrifying way. Mina pulled up an image on her tablet. It was the garden world reconstructed from the Kthari data. Spiral trees, copper rivers, blue moss. They would have gone back there, you know. to harvest it. Now they never will. Do you think? Tashik started, then hesitated. Do you think there are other worlds like ours? Not just with life, but with this. A defense. Mina considered it. Dr. Choi thinks it's rare. The moss from On was the missing piece. It's a quantum bridge builder. Most life probably can't make the jump from biology affecting biology to biology affecting complex, alien technology. Our life is just particularly aggressive. Billions of years of every creature, every plant, every microbe fighting a war for survival. That fight doesn't stop. It just found a new battlefield. She zoomed in on the image of the blue moss. Labs across Earth were now cultivating it, studying it. It was the most valuable substance in known space and also the most dangerous. It was a stark lesson. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. The two of them sat in silence for a while, looking out the window at the darkening sky. The first stars were coming out. I don't feel safer, Tashik admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Knowing what's down here, I used to look up and feel small. Now I look down and feel the same way.
Mina nodded.
She understood. The galaxy had not become more friendly. It had become a darker, more complicated place. Earth was not a fragile blue dot. It was a fortress. But living in a fortress, knowing the walls are alive and the gates are a biochemical trap, changes your sense of home. The official border of Earth's territory was still marked on charts. But the real border was now something else. It was a sphere of influence defined by a hum from the rocks and a silent, waiting library of adaptable life. A border that had been tested once with absolute finality. The Kthari Armada had vanished from the galaxy completely. Not a shred of evidence remained in space. The only evidence was on Earth itself, in the labs growing blue moss, in the seismic sensors that now permanently monitored a new, faint planetary hum, and in the minds of the people who had seen it. Humanity's place in the universe had shifted. They were not conquerors. They were not even defenders. They were the inhabitants of a world that could defend itself. Their future in the stars was no longer a simple dream of exploration. It was a careful question of what they might accidentally bring with them and what they might unknowingly provoke. Mina switched off the image of the peaceful garden world. The screen went black, reflecting their tired faces. Below them, the city lights of Seoul twinkled, life going on as normal, unaware of the deep, quiet power it was built upon. They breached the border once, Tashik said, finishing his coffee. Mina looked at him, then out at the stars. Yes, she said, and I don't think anyone will ever try it again. Captain Lee Jun floated near the main observation window of the United Earth Orbital Watch Station Sentry 7. Below him, the blue and white marble of Earth turned in perfect silence. His shift was quiet like most of them. For 3 years, his job had been to watch the endless, empty dark for signs of something that never came. The official title was Planetary Border Security. Most crew just called it the Lookout. His communications officer, Park Mina, drifted into the command bubble. She handed him a bulb of coffee. Anything on the scopes? Nothing new, June said, taking a slow sip. The usual solar wind. A few cargo haulers near Luna. Quiet. Mina nodded and slid into her station. Her fingers danced over the holographic panels, running the standard diagnostic checks. Sentry 7 was a small station, a spinning ring with a crew of 15. Its job was to be Earth's farthest set of electronic eyes, a lonely sentinel parked at a gravitational sweet spot between Earth and the Moon. System check is green, Mina said. All long-range scanners are nominal. It's a good night for staring at nothing. June allowed himself a small smile. He liked the quiet. He had requested deep space duty after too many years in the noisy political corridors of the Earth-Luna Command. Here, there was only the hum of the life support and the data. An hour later, the quiet broke. It was not a sound, but a feeling. A deep, subsonic vibration that traveled through the frame of the station. June felt it in his bones before the alarms began to flash. A soft, persistent chime filled the command bubble. On June's main screen, a section of the outer solar system map pulsed with a red marker. It was out near the orbit of Mars. Mina, he said, his voice calm but firm. Confirmed source. Gravimetric anomaly. Mina's hands moved quickly, her eyes locked on her own data stream. Confirming. Reading a spike at Lagrange point 4. Massive spatial distortion. It's not a meteor swarm. The signature is all wrong. June pulled the data to his main viewer. The graphs showed a sudden, intense bending of local spacetime. It was like a stone dropped into a still pond, but the ripples were in the fabric of reality itself. This was not human technology. Human drives made noise, left radiation trails. This was a clean, silent tear. Initiate full alert. Passive sensors only. Do not ping them, June ordered. His heart was a slow, heavy drum in his chest. This was the thing they had trained for and never truly expected. Mina sent the silent alarm to Earth Command. Within minutes, the station's quiet hum was joined by the low thrum of activated shield generators and the click of weapon systems coming online. A futile gesture, they both knew, against anything capable of such an entrance. Then, the main viewer flickered. The stars near Mars wavered, like heat haze on a desert road. And then they were there. One moment, empty space. The next, an armada. They were not ships of metal and flame. They were angular, crystalline structures that reflected the distant sun's light in cold, sharp fragments. They had no visible engines, no gun ports. They simply existed, a sprawling, silent fleet of geometric ice, hanging in the dark. Hundreds of them. The scanner estimates scrolled on June's screen, giving size readings that made his throat tighten. The largest was bigger than Sentry, 7 by 100 times. God, Mina whispered, her hand frozen over her console. The fleet made no move. It did not advance. It did not broadcast threats or demands. It just sat there, a silent, glittering wall beyond the red planet. Any transmissions? June asked, his eyes fixed on the viewer. Nothing. No radio, no lasercom, no tachones. Complete electromagnetic silence. Mina's voice was tight with fear. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, a single pulse emitted from the largest crystal vessel. It was not a signal any of their systems could decode. It washed over Sentry 7. Through it, a wave of pure data that made the station's lights flicker and the air taste of ozone. It was a sound you felt in your teeth. And then, silence again. The Armada remained. On Earth, panic would be spreading. Fleets would be scrambling. News channels would be screaming. But here, on the edge, there was only a profound, unsettling stillness. June looked from the incomprehensible fleet to the peaceful Earth below. The border, an imaginary line in space that marked Earth's sovereign territory, lay somewhere between them and the silent invaders. They had not crossed it yet. What are they waiting for? Mina asked, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of her station. June had no answer. This wasn't a tactical approach. There was no aggression, no communication. Felt like something else. Felt like a violation. Not of territory, but of something deeper. The natural order. The quiet of their little corner of space had been shattered not by a roar, but by a silent, observing presence that he knew the orders would come soon. Demands to hail them, warnings to be issued. But as he watched the crystalline fleet, Lee June felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. This was not a meeting. This was an arrival. And the rules for what happened next had not been written by humans. The two of them floated in the command bubble. The only sounds the beeps of their instruments and the rush of their own breath, staring at the impossible sight that had come to their silent doorstep. The waiting had begun.